I'm the Mr. C, and this is my One Wheel Crisis. Hello everybody. Today we'll be riding Brandermill from Riverbirch Trace through Seven Oaks. Come on along and let's go for a ride.
This house coming up has a rather interesting shape, and I would probably pay my two left eye teeth to get a look inside to see A, how many floors there are, and how they're all put together. Funny thing about the name Brandermill, I looked up the etymology of Brandermill, and apparently there was an immigrant from Scotland named John Brander, and he did own some mills, and lived in a plantation called Poplar Grove. But he has absolutely no connection to the community whatsoever. The name was actually created as a result of focus group data.
Done the entire right side of Brandermill. I'm doing the left side now. This is as far as I've gotten from Sunday Park.
Good job. Keep it up.
You're watching the videos?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, very cool. Thank you.
I am going to forego Entomology Corner again for a new enemy that I've discovered. Expansive soil. Expansive soils contain minerals such as smeclite, nontronite, bentonite, chlorite, attapulgite, illite, and believe it or not, vermicellite. Now, these clays are capable of absorbing water. When they absorb water, they increase volume, and the more water they absorb, the more the volume they increase. Now, expansions of 10% or more are not uncommon, and this property is measured using coefficient of linear extensibility called COLE, or Cole values. If a soil has a Cole value of 0.06, then it can cause structural damage to a building. Now, what this means essentially is that for every 100 inches of soil you have, it will expand 6 inches. Cracked foundations, floors, and basement walls are typical types of damage done by swelling soils. Damage to the upper floors of the buildings can occur when the motion in the structure is significant. Expansive soils are present throughout the world and are in every U.S. state. Each year they cause billions of dollars in damage, and the American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that 1/4 of all homes in the United States have some damage caused by expansive soils. In a typical year in the United States, they cause greater financial loss to property owners than earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes combined. Even though expansive soils cause enormous amounts of damage, most people have never even heard of them. This is because their damage is done slowly and cannot be attributed to a specific event. The damage done by expansive soils is often attributed to poor construction practices or a misconception that buildings experience this type of damage as they age. Turns out that in the 90s, due to an extreme drought, it was discovered that 3 to 4% of the homes in Brandermill were extremely affected. 200 homes with broken foundations or tipping chimneys. Up to 1,000 homes were affected by the soil. And after doing all this research, I'm beginning to believe that I'm one of the thousands, as I have trouble opening my door during certain seasons and other issues as well. Yeah. There are ways to mitigate or prevent damage caused by the expansive soils, but with my research, I'm discovering that most of those are super expensive and in many cases probably cost more than the houses themselves.
Now, I've done a fair amount of research on Brandermill during the course of these videos, and I keep finding one thing in common: the interrupters, or if you wish, the hinderers, or the interferers, the obstructors, the impeders, the delayers, the handicappers, or the inhibitors. I shall refer to them as they from now on. I know it's rude, but it's better than calling them legion. It seems that since the beginning, someone has been brazzed off about Brandermill. The long and the short of it is that someone has something I want. What? I can't have it? Well, then no one can, or I will make everyone's life miserable. And at one point, they attempted to buy the land under the reservoir so they could own the reservoir. They also launched a campaign before Brandermill started building, indicating that they couldn't build there because it would taint the water supply. Then Brandermill, who had inherited so many reports you could choke on them, had to go and pay $9,000 to VCU to have engineers come over to say essentially what they already knew. At one point, the sewer system in Brandermill came up for renewal. They came out of the woodworks and forced to campaign against it. Now, the irony is that they spent all that effort and time campaigning against the only thing that was guaranteed to pass. It took me a while when I first moved here to Virginia to cope with Christians being openly evil. I worked in a bookstore, and in that day I was working in the video section. A very terse-looking lady walks in and asks me for something that I can't quite hear her. And apparently there was a TV series called AD. She repeats herself slowly and softly and says, AD, you know, after death. Now, I, not having learned my lesson yet, stopped and pointed out, you mean Anno Domini. She literally puts her hand on her hips and says, huh? You know, Anno Domini Nostri Jesu Christi, in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's Latin. Her head rocked back like I struck her. And she, with the most venom I think I have ever heard, says, I think I will take the word of my pastor over your heathen mumbo jumbo. And don't you think for a second, just because you use the Lord's name in vain in some fancy dead language, you're not going to hell. And then she stormed off. And all I could think to say was, Et oblitus vestri video.
Now, at this point, I was going to take a moment to shamelessly plug my next project, which actually would have occurred on Saturday, yesterday, since you're seeing this on Sunday. I was intending to ride my one wheel the length of the Virginia Trail, 52 whole miles, technically 8.5 hours with all the charging. And I had to stop in several locations to charge, but due to technical difficulties, my 360 battery discharged about halfway through and was useless. And then I ended up running into a lot of problems where the places I had called previously to say, hey, can I charge with you, wouldn't let me charge with them when I got there. So the whole thing is kind of a weird project, but I'm going to go ahead and put it up on YouTube anyway. I hope you guys enjoy it. That'll be the next video in 2 weeks. The Australian physicist Erwin Schrödinger suffered from a debilitating bowel condition that would often result in him soiling himself unexpectedly. However, it was impossible for him to tell whether he had actually had an accident or not, and lived in a perpetual state of both being soiled and unsoiled simultaneously. This became known as Schrödinger's scat. A former student of a geology professor at a major university returned one day to give his professor a gift of a unique soil sample he had collected from a river while he was on a trip. To which the professor replied, "I appreciate the sediment." When I was younger, I had a horrible condition that meant I had to eat soil 3 times a day. I am lucky my older brother told me about it, and we caught it early.
Now, I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of a Japanese band called Band-Maid, and despite the hokey name and the horrible outfits, there are actually a lot of really good, talented female musicians in that band, and it's well worth a listen to. And always remember, the best way to help myself and my channel is by liking and subscribing. Also, sharing the bejeebus out of my videos, and alternately watching more of the video, which raises my average view duration, which also raises the amount of my videos that YouTube pushes in other people's faces. So every little bit helps. Thank you so much. Well, that is it for this time. Thanks for spending the time and taking the ride. See you next time.